Welcome to this explainer. Look, I absolutely love breaking down massive data sets, and today we are tackling something that affects literally all of us. What actually makes an urban environment secure? We're going to decode the entire concept of city safety, specifically through the lens of global livability indices. Because as you'll see, the most livable cities in the world share this hidden foundational formula for safety that goes way, way beyond what you might expect.
So let's just stop and think about this for a second. What actually makes a city safe? When you're walking down the street in your own neighborhood, what specifically makes you feel secure? Is it just the absence of crime? Or is there this much deeper, hidden infrastructure of security working quietly in the background? Well, today, we're not just guessing. We are leaning into hard, empirical data from major international reports to figure this out. We're going to look past our everyday subjective fears to uncover the actual math behind livable, secure cities. All right, Section 1, how to measure city safety. To really get a grip on this, we've got to look at how international organizations objectively assess the livability and security of our urban spaces. Okay, so when you look at the top-ranked cities across the Global Livability Index and the Safe Cities Index, a super clear pattern pops out. Places from the Western world and Asia, we're talking Vienna, Copenhagen, Tokyo, Singapore, they consistently absolutely dominate the top of these lists. And you might be wondering, why? Well, it's because a sky-high livability score, like Vienna pulling a near-perfect 98.9, is tied directly to profound institutional stability. These indices factor in things like robust healthcare, incredibly low personal risk, and solid infrastructure. You literally cannot have a highly livable city without first laying down this rock-solid foundation of safety. It's a completely holistic view of human well-being. Which brings us to Section 2, a deep dive into the Safe Cities Index. Let's really unpack the specific methodology used by the Economist Intelligence Unit, or the EIU. When you map out the overall scores for 60 major urban areas, a really fascinating correlation emerges. There is this distinct, measurable link between high average incomes, deep governmental transparency, and the massive scores achieved by cities like Copenhagen, Toronto, and Singapore. True safety doesn't just happen by accident. The data makes it crystal clear that it requires serious financial investment and highly transparent, accountable institutions to maintain that delicate urban order. To understand how this massive machine actually operates, let's move to Section 3, the 5 pillars of safety. Because the EIU isn't just counting stolen wallets. They actually break urban safety down into these 5 essential pillars: digital, health, infrastructure, personal, and environmental security. Every single one of these buckets has highly specific, measurable inputs and outputs. And honestly, the data throws us a bit of a curveball here. A city might be the global heavyweight champion in one area, like Copenhagen taking the absolute #1 spot for personal security globally, but then totally struggle in another, like health security, where it sits way down at 26th. A city could have bulletproof digital privacy, but completely drop the ball on green initiatives. The takeaway? Absolutely no city is perfect across the board. If we zoom in just on that personal security pillar for a second, individual safety is treated as a huge collective effort. It's measured by objective things, like the actual capacity of a justice system, how strictly they enforce domestic violence laws, and the recorded prevalence of petty crime. So it's a far cry from just asking people if they feel scared. It's about evaluating a city's actual structural capacity to protect its people, day in and day out. And that perfectly sets up Section 4, statistics versus feeling. Because human emotion and hard data, they often tell two wildly different stories. Just compare these two totally distinct approaches to gathering info. You have renowned organizations like the EIU and the World Economic Forum using rigorous, peer-reviewed, multidimensional indicators. On the flip side, crowdsourced platforms like Numbeo rely heavily on, well, subjective internet opinions. And as researchers love to point out, crowdsourced data can sometimes be hugely misleading. Why? Because it's measuring the fear of crime, which is incredibly subjective, rather than the statistical reality. Take this observation from a frequent traveler as a perfect example of this disconnect. They pointed out feeling far safer from pickpockets in Australian cities, like Sydney, than in iconic European capitals. People kind of naturally assume major European cities are perfectly safe because of their wealth and cultural status, right? But the daily reality of petty crime in places like Paris, Rome, or London is actually a totally different story compared to major hubs in Australia or Asia. It just highlights this massive, incredibly common gap in how we perceive global urban safety. Okay, let's bring this closer to home in Section 5, the safety of Bangkok. We're going to apply this framework locally and compare this major Southeast Asian metropolis to other global tourist hubs. A recent comparative research report maps out Bangkok's situation so perfectly. Check this out. During the day, Bangkok enjoys a really high safety perception rating of nearly 80 out of 100. People generally feel great. But once the sun goes down, that perception drops pretty significantly to a moderate 57.87. But hang on, we really need to pause and ask ourselves a critical question. Is a nighttime score in the 50s actually bad when you look at it in a wider global context? Well, the comparative data gives us a completely surprising answer. Even with local anxieties pulling that score down, statistical data proves that people actually feel significantly safer walking alone at night in Bangkok than they do in London, Paris, or Kuala Lumpur. I mean, wow, right? The perception of danger in a developing metropolis just doesn't always align with the comparative reality of those massive celebrated Western hubs. So here is the really crucial takeaway. Bangkok's overall crime index sits at 39.8. That's a relatively low figure, putting it in a very safe bracket for violent crime compared to a lot of Western cities. But, and it's a big but, its real safety challenges, the stuff that actually drags down those overall livability scores, are hiding in plain sight as infrastructure risks. We're talking severe traffic accidents, pedestrian safety issues, commercial scams. These non-violent factors are what heavily impact how livable the city is on a random Tuesday. And this is exactly why looking at all 5 pillars of safety is absolutely essential to getting the full picture. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a crucial question to ponder. Are you judging your city's safety solely on that subjective emotional fear of crime, or are you looking at the complete, multidimensional picture of its livability? Environmental, digital, health, and infrastructure security, they define our modern urban reality just as having a police officer on the corner. The next time you walk your local streets, really look around and ask yourself, what is my city doing right now to build the hidden infrastructure of safety? I hope this data gives you a totally new perspective on what a secure city actually looks like.